Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for tonight's Musically Speaking. My name is Anthony Trecek-King. I'm one of the resident conductors of choirs here at the Handel and Haydn Society, and we have a special night for you tonight. We've got three phenomenal people to be here speaking, and the concert is British Baroque, which is this Friday, February 2nd at 7:30 p.m., and also on Sunday, February 4th at 3 o'clock p.m., both at Jordan Hall. So let's get right into introductions. First, let's introduce our wonderful musicians. We have Rachel Podger, who is a violinist who currently lives in Wales, comes from a family of singers, and as you may or may not know, she lives next to a field of sheep, um, which, it's very idyllic, and we all want to certainly be in Wales, living next to a field of sheep. You'll hear from Rachel a little bit later. Phenomenal violinist, just you'll love it. And we also are joined here by Reggie Mobley, countertenor, who lives in Boston. And there are no fields of sheep here in Boston, unfortunately, but there are great coffee shops. So there are some things that we can do here in Boston that are absolutely fantastic as well. So both of these will be featured on the concert coming up on Friday and Sunday. And next is Teresa. Teresa, you are the resident kind of scholar of H&H. So Teresa Neff, who will be talking to us a little bit about some of the music that we have going on here. So Teresa, I turn it over to you.
All right, thanks so much. Welcome everyone. I'm going to share my screen with everyone and we can talk a little bit about some of the music that we'll hear this weekend. So we have works by Henry Purcell, George Friedrich Handel, and Ignatius Sancho. And this will take us from the later part of the 17th century up through into the 18th century. And it's a wonderful kind of mix of both vocal and instrumental music, as you can see by the selections that we have laid out for you. What fascinates me about this concert is just the range that we will get, both vocally and instrumentally. And I'm sure Rachel and Reggie can talk about that a little bit later. What I'd like to focus on is something that's particular to music of the 18th century, certainly all music, but particularly Baroque music. And that's the kind of polarity between high range instruments and low range instruments that occur in a lot of this repertoire. And we'll talk about the high range when we talk with Reggie and Rachel, but I'd like to start with the low, and that is the bass lines. And I've chosen excerpts from three works, the Chaconne from Purcell's Gordian Knot, the aria Cara Sposa from Rinaldo by Handel, and then Friendship, the Source of Joy by Ignatius Sancho. So we'll start with the Purcell. And what I have here is just the short bass line on which this entire chaconne is built. And you'll notice a couple of things. The main part of it is descending. And also there are notes that are chromatic. That is, they sit outside the key and they are colored. So I've colored the shape of them for us. And what you hear is this wonderful sense of kind of just pulling down when we hear these chromatic notes. What I have here is just this line played on the harpsichord. It's a little bit slow so that we can take in the that descent. So this is the foundation of the entire chaconne, which by definition is a bass line on which a series of repetitions and variations are built. This bass line will get varied itself as Purcell continues through the movement, but what goes on above that bass line is a kind of pattern of tension and release. And with the variations, we get something new with each iteration of the bass line. In this recording, the tempo is faster than what you just heard with the harpsichord alone. But I think what we can take away from it is the sense of cadence or closure. We'll pay attention to that every once in a while. And there will be moments when we can hear that sense of the chromatic line and that push and pull that it creates. Sorry about that. Here's the chaconne. And here's where the variation of the chaconne line itself starts to take place. You might start to hear the line come back again in the bass. If you find yourself saying, I've lost track of it, that's okay. Because what Purcell does is create, true to the title, it's a kind of musical knot. He's a very, very skilled composer, so we're not going to necessarily be aware of all of the intricacies of these knots. I think what we'll feel this weekend, though, is this wonderful sense of tension building over a longer period of time and also releasing. And that building of tension and releasing is inherent in this very line that we've heard from the very beginning in the bass line. So this is generating the composition, but it's also generating the mood that comes with it. Handel does something similar with his bass line for Cara Sposa. This is also a chromatic line, but it is ascending rather than descending. And he does a couple of things. He starts the whole aria with the strings, with the upper strings, and we don't hear this bass line. He waits and kind of holds back on it, and that creates its own wonderful sense of not necessarily tension, but kind of loss of foundation, a sense of wandering and not sure where we might end up going. Here's the very opening of Cara Sposa. Start to notice a chromatic line here. Now we haven't even had the entrance of the voice yet, but when the voice does come in, we get the text, "My dear spouse, where are you?" So we have a character, Rinaldo, whose love has been lost. She's actually been kidnapped. And this opening gives us that incredible sense of loss, of wandering, of wondering. But after we hear the voice, and this is what I think Handel does so brilliantly, the longer line made up of shorter ideas is what we're talking about with the vocal part. And then when we have all of this text sung to us once, then we hear the bass, a true kind of basso continuo bass come in with this chromatic ascending line. And listen for how it gives such a wonderful sense of foundation, maybe certainty, maybe even hope. I'll start the excerpt just a little bit into the vocal line around Dove sei. Here's that line. the instrumental part gives such a wonderful sense of pull. And now the pull is in a completely different direction. And again, this is a use of a bass line to enhance a text, to enhance a mood, but also it's a continuous line, so it constantly interacts or weaves in and out of what we hear in the vocal part as well. And then our next example comes from Ignatius Sancho, Friendship's Source of Joy. This bass line is a little bit different. It is a shorter line. This is just the introduction of the song, but it divides into two halves. And the first half establishes a pattern, and that's what I have for us here. This is just the first half. It rises, it drops, and then it starts up again. But what is interesting here, and what our ear will catch on to, is how Sancho is creating a sense of harmonic anticipation in just the way he's organized this bass line. Again, this is just on harpsichord, and it is a little bit slower than you will hear in the actual performance this weekend, but I want us to be able to hear that sense of anticipation. I let it finish, and the reason I let it finish is because that's what Sancho does. He gives us the second half, and so here in the two yellowish blocks are the places where we have repetitions of the first half, the beginning of the first half and the beginning of the second half. The second half completes the first half. And so between the two, we get a complete idea, but we also have that wonderful sense of anticipation that happens literally halfway through. And that becomes the foundation for the entire verse of the song, Friendship's Source of Joy. We get two lines that correspond to that first half, that establishing an idea, and then that moment where we have to wait for the tension, our anticipation to be fulfilled. And then the second half where all of that works itself out and we actually come back to where we started harmonically. And so these are just a couple of examples of what we will hear throughout the concert this weekend, of how a bass line really starts to create and inform not just a mood, but maybe even how the entire rest of a movement will work itself out. We're so used to listening to top lines, and we should totally listen to top lines. We should listen to Rachel's gorgeous violin, and we should listen to Reggie's fantastic voice. But don't forget about how they interact with the bass line, because the composer has given us kind of this wonderful palette to work with. And then we need our performers to think about and tell us how they're going to interpret and think about these interactions. So that's where I'd like to turn the conversation, if I may, to start with. Rachel, how do you, with something like the chaconne, how do you think about this bass line, the violin parts, the other parts, how do they interact with each other?
So in a movement that has a kind of repeated ground bass, it's all about the bass. I mean, literally, it's just everything. It starts there and it remains there. And as a treble player, you are constantly directed to that, and you need to be constantly directed, because especially as a treble player, I don't know about Reggie, but you know, we're so used to kind of being trebly and just being up there all the time, and also in other repertoire, you know, when you learn the violin as an instrument, you're always playing the tune. I mean, you might play a second part underneath, like the second violin part, but you never ever get to play a bass line. There's something wrong with that. it's really, really important to play bass lines, especially if you're going to be playing Baroque music. So I get all my students and, well, sometimes professionals too, to actually play the bass line. Actually, we're going to do that tomorrow. Just to kind of inhabit it, you know, just to kind of just get the sense of what the meaning of it. Because bass lines, as you very rightly pointed out, they're all very different. And if you have a chromatic bass line that is descending, has a very different affect to one that ascends. So you're talking about the hope in the Handel, because it's ascending, and it's the opposite in the descending bass line rhetorically, that invokes kind of pain and pathos and kind of internal turmoil. So that's what we've been thinking about.
It's all about that bass, isn't it?
Yes. What about
you said it, I had to drop it in there.
Yeah, so true.
Go ahead, Teresa. I'm sorry, I cut you off there. You're going to ask Reggie.
No. I was just going to ask Reggie if you think about it in the same way. Do you sing the bass line?
I do, only because I'm a massive nerd. But I mean, when I first really got into Baroque music or music in general, I mean, I would go to the public library and check out scores of everything that I had on CD or on cassette. And I would just sit in a library or my room or in a coffee shop and then just focus on all the bass lines of, you know, Brandenburg Concerti and Brahms, you know, symphonies and everything. There's so much there that sets the foundation for everything that's going on. I mean, it's so exciting.
Absolutely, 100%. While we're kind of in this pause here, I also want to remind the listeners that those of you out there, the Q&A is live. If you have questions for our guests, feel free to kind of drop the question into the Q&A. We'll be picking through those a little bit later. Reggie and Rachel and Teresa as well, I completely agree. Like the bass line not only sets kind of the mood in many ways, and of course I'm biased because I grew up playing bass lines, unlike violinists. You know, as a cellist, you're constantly playing bass lines. But it kind of sets the mood, sets the pacing, the kind of harmonic rhythm, in which then the upper lines could play off of. So it's and all three of those examples, Teresa, that you played, they're quite different, but yet they're still really important. So Reggie, what are you looking forward to in this particular concert? Like, what is it that you're trying to get the audience to kind of absorb with this set of music, particularly the pieces that you're singing?
Well, mostly I'll be focusing on Rachel because it's just such a treat to sing with her again. But I think what's so fascinating about this concert specifically is, again, all the incredible harmonies and the bass lines that exist in the songs and pieces in this concert, but also just how impressive all of this music comes from three completely different composers who come from three completely different backgrounds. I think it's you have one man who is a native born Englishman. You have one who's an expat, an immigrant, and then you have one who found his way there by horrible circumstance, by the horrors of slavery. But all three contributed so much to the musical landscape of Britain, and I mean, to this day, I think they kind of create this kind of foundation for me for what makes music great, not just in Britain but in general. And I think that it's hardly competition, but it's from one piece to another, whether it be sung or played. It's just, well, this is my favorite. No, well, this is my favorite. No, well, this is my favorite. No, the next one's definitely no. But it's just going to be a wonderful time for everyone involved, as far as I'm concerned.
Now, Rachel, you and Reggie have worked on this concert before. Can you tell us a little bit about the origins of the concert? Like, why did you put it together in the first place, so that our audience can kind of soak that in?
Yes, of course. So I was about to do a project with Juilliard students with their group that's called J415, and we were talking about a program. So Robert Mealy, the director of the program, and we were kind of playing around with ideas, and I'd done various other projects. I'd done a lot of Italian music and German music, and he would say, oh, how about something British? And I said, great. And how about working with Reggie? And I was like, yeah. So that was all of that going on. And so then we basically got down to nitty gritty, and I said, well, we've got to do Purcell, of course, and we've got to do Handel, really. And then Reggie came up, I think, with the Sancho. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, because I didn't know that music at all. I didn't even know about this composer. So it's enriched my life no end. I mean, his music is extremely uplifting, and it's kind of it's influenced by the kind of country dance kind of style of music. So some of it feels a bit like a hoedown, or like a kind of, you really want to tap your feet. You want to get up and dance and do do-si-do some of the time.
I think you did.
Yeah. I think maybe we did in the rehearsal. Yeah, we were all kind of fired up. It's that kind of music. So it's very much in juxtaposition to the Purcell, for instance, which of course there's a lot of dance music in that, but it's so complex. The inner parts are so intertwined and beautifully complex around, on top of that bass line. And as Teresa was saying, it's really easy to actually lose the bass line, because your attention is drawn to so many kind of false relations harmonically, and beautiful sighing figures and all sorts of rhetorical kind of devices that he uses. And it's really heartfelt. I mean, some of it is so tender and just simple in its line, really, as a song. There's some kind of instrumental songs as well that we get to play, which is such a treat for us as instrumentalists. And we were just talking about this earlier when we were warming up for this webinar. We were just talking about how instrumentalists need to take singers as their example, and very much in history, that's how it very much is and worked, and was encouraged to play your instrument like a singer, and you breathe, and you in the right places like a singer would, and you enunciate vowels and your shapes, and you play with articulation, which are the consonants. So we think about that a lot as instrumental players. So we're constantly inspired by singers.
Oh, that's great. And the Baroque instrument in particular, with the strings and so on, is suited to the articulation and the variety of articulation that's out there. So having a period orchestra there performing this music is going to be fantastic to see and hear all those connections between the voice and the instruments and so on. So that's phenomenal. And Reggie, so Sancho has been somebody that you've looked into for a while, and as Rachel said, you brought Sancho to this particular program. But tell us about your kind of quick history. I know some people have heard it before, but I think it'd be great to kind of enliven it again about how you came in contact with Sancho and the research that's out there.
Well, Sancho was originally introduced to me by a very good friend, a historical keyboardist, Henry Lebedinsky. And from the moment we played through and sang through the first couple of songs, I was just like, I absolutely love this man. I mean, and once I started doing some research and reading about who he was and his story, I couldn't believe that he wasn't a commonplace name on either side of the Atlantic, to be honest. And not just the fact that he's not just a brilliant musician, but was an incredible person, a man of letters, who was known, in the British literati of the time. But here was someone who was so successful and so well established, who looked just like me. And I'm pretty sure if I threw in a powdered wig right now and shaved, you wouldn't know the difference, except for one of them has a cell phone. But the thing is Sancho is just, I mean, his music is so charming, and like we mentioned before, with the complexity of the bass lines and the melodies and the harmonies about it, there's really just two big beats in a bar. There's no confusion over who claps on 1 and 3 and 2 and 4. It is just a romp from bar 1 to the end, and that's what he goes for. That's what you get in this music. That there, no matter how complex or how simple, in Sancho's music, there is a very clear idea that what all these musicians, all three and beyond, are going for is connecting to the affect and the feelings and what connects us all together with the human condition, the human spirit. And so I think he perfectly rounds out a program like this. And I will always champion this man who was not only a brilliant musician and theorist and writer, but also, I mean, the very first Black person to vote in parliamentary elections in the UK. So, I mean, an incredible man to know.
And what's also really interesting about Sancho compared to Purcell and Handel is that musically it is different. Like there are three different styles here. It wasn't like there was a carbon copy and he was just, mimicking somebody else. He created something that was new and fresh. And like you said, there's dance and rhythm to it. And there's a life to it that is quite exciting when you sit down and listen to it. So I think the audience is in for a treat this weekend to kind of hear the differences between those three. So that's fantastic. We have a question from the audience. This is from Debbie, and I actually don't know this answer, so this will be good to hear. But for the audience this weekend, is there going to be an introduction to the program, a verbal one, similar to what you both are giving so eloquently right now, so that the audience that are there will have some sort of connection to the music if they missed this? I mean, obviously they should be here watching this because this is fantastic, but I'm just curious, is that part of the plan for this weekend?
I think we might entertain that thought, mightn't we, Reggie?
I think so.
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that.
Well, I guess they're taking requests. So anybody else have any requests for Rachel?
There will be, I'll give a little something 45 minutes before each performance. It's kind of an overview as well, a little bit different from what we talk about today, but it's always really wonderful to hear from the stage as well.
Yeah,
yes, it's nice. It always breaks the ice. It's nice. Yeah, it's nice to do that. It's fun.
Well, that's great. So Rachel, is there any parting words that you have for our listeners tonight?
Oh gosh. Well, as Reggie was saying, that you're playing a particular movement or piece and you think, oh yeah, this is the one. My heart is in this, it's everywhere. And then you think, oh, okay. And then you get to the next one. So no, it's this one. It's a bit like that, this program. It's just full of gems. I just love all the differences. We haven't really talked about Handel very much, but Handel in this program, he shows lots of different sides. So you get the kind of the tenderness that we've talked about in Cara Sposa, and such ethereal beauty in the dulcet tones, that amazing aria with muted strings. And then the instrumental works are quite different in a way. So you have all sorts going on. It's a concerto grosso with oboes, bassoon, obviously basso continuo with lute, the harpsichord lute, and all the strings. And there's a lot of grandeur and nobility in that music, but also very clear structure in the kind of fugal movements, and then also some beautiful dance elements, not really strictly a dance in the andante and the second movement, but it's got this lovely kind of cradling kind of it's I have to sing it to you. It goes, I don't know how I'm doing it justice, Reggie, but it's just got this beautiful gestural kind of sung movement, which I absolutely adore. And it's really, really wonderful to coax that out of the instrument with the shapes, especially with gut strings and Baroque bass. So yum, yum, yum. That's all I can say.
Okay, so yum, yum, yum. So it's all about that bass and yum, yum, yum. That's what we get from Rachel. That's so great. And Reggie, any final words from you for our audiences?
I think just come expecting for your soul to be fed. I mean, it's such great music from beginning to end, and it's so carefully curated. I mean, this is not music that is going to be sitting on a pedestal. This is music that requires full engagement from everyone involved. I mean, whether you feel to drop a tear in the Handel or stomp your feet during the Sancho, I think it's important just to realize that everyone in the hall is going to be completely involved in this concert emotionally, and don't come and sit with a frown. Feel free to let your hair down, and if you do, see if you can find mine on the floor with it. But it's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to this so much.
Oh, that's fantastic. So Reggie, is there any particular piece that the audience can listen to prior to the concert that's a good introduction to Sancho in particular?
To Sancho, I think Friendship The Source of Joy is probably the best one to introduce yourself to Sancho, because it has such a strong relationship to Purcell, to O Solitude. You know, there's so many songs and pieces are written about love, you know, for all time. But there, in the Baroque period, there are almost just as many songs written about how love is the most dangerous thing you can encounter. And pieces like O Solitude and Friendship really focus on the other things that really make life worthwhile. And it's kind of an anthem for you know, for so many people like myself, those two songs in particular. But it's a wonderful time. It's just wonderful music. And I think once you get a sense of these songs, it's just going to be so much better when you get to the hall.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, this is great. I hope everybody's looking forward to it. I know I am. Teresa, thank you so much for the great scholarship and to point out the bass line. It is all about that bass. Rachel Podger on violin and Reggie Mobley countertenor. For the concert this weekend, again, it is British Baroque. We have a concert Friday, February 2nd at 7:30 Jordan Hall, and then Sunday, February 4th at 3 p.m. again at Jordan Hall, and we hope to see you all there. So thank you for joining us tonight for our Musically Speaking, and we will look forward to seeing you again soon.